Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Welcome to Strong Dads. Hey, Kyle, what are you doing?
Not much, Merle. Where the heck
so
are
far
you?
Away?
I know if you know, here in the good old city of Cincinnati, it's raining and crappy, and it's not looking good. What do you got going on? What's where you're at?
Terrible. Well, it's going to be 83 today. It is currently sunny. I think it's about 78 right now. So it's, not quite swimming weather, but close.
All right. Where the heck are you?
I am down in Florida. I'm down in Florida at Linda's parents' house for a little week of vacation. And so, yes, we are coming to you, Strong Dads, out there remotely through Zoom. We are recording.
Well, Merle, I have a question for you. So our last show, for those of you guys who haven't watched or listened to, we would encourage you to go back and listen to. We talked about getting lost and being confidently wrong. So the question, how many signs did Linda say that's the exit you need, and you listen to her, and or were the kids like they saw the golden arches and you let the emotions run wild? What all happened on the trail?
Let me tell you. So I told you, I said, without fail, this happens. I was wrong this time. Like, we did not have any issues, like not even one. We both decided to get off one exit to go to the bathroom, and it was poor signage. And here there was a restroom, but it was about 2 miles off the exit. So, but we both made that call. So, it wasn't like we were bickering at each other. We made it. We're good.
Linda, I'm glad that you were not confidently wrong. You were confidently right.
You're confidently right, but just took a long road, not a wrong road.
Well, good deal. So Merle, what are we going to get into today? Obviously, you're living large out in Florida. I'm down here in rainy old Cincinnati. What the heck are we going to talk about this week?
All right. So today we are going to challenge some strong dads out there to really take a look at their practices in life, to see if their practices really are indicating the life that they say they want. All right. So kind of like doing your homework sort of thing. Like, do you do your homework? Do you do the stuff that you're supposed to do to get you where you want to be? And so, man, there's lots of areas in life that I will fall short on this. I would like more money, but do I do the things I need to do to make sure I get more money? I'd like to be more fit. Well, do I do the things I'd like to do to be more fit? And so, a lot of these things we can brush off, but some of them I think come at a higher price to us as strong dads, whether it's a raising of our children, whether it's a protection of our marriage, whether it's just the protection of our home in general from the outside forces that continue to try to permeate. So we're going to have a good conversation today just about what, how things break in, how we fall short, but also then what we can do to button it up a little bit and to get a little bit more focused, because, before you know it, you slip on things. Like, you're not quite as good as you used to be. I will share with you the idea that I've been riding my bike down here. In my brain, I still have the performance level that I was at in September last year when I started to wind my season down. And so I haven't ridden a bike all winter. And so now I'm on my bike. My performance stinks. I'm fat and slow now. And so it's like, well, you haven't done anything. You haven't done anything on the bike, at least. And so, this is that indicator that you have to put some different stop points in where you go, okay, I better turn this around, or I better start doing my work again, or I will slip even farther.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think, Merle, we come on here every week and we talk about different ways that we have experienced and we're learning how to be, a strong dad and a strong husband for our wives. And this idea of the homework and preparing ourselves, the idea of strong dad doesn't just happen on accident. This is a lifelong journey to try and be better for our kids, better for our wives. And unless we are willing to put in the work, the idea of being a strong dad is not going to happen for us. And I think all of us can take a step back and realize there's times, we all go through the seasons of life. There's times when I'm just not feeling it, right? The girls come in, I just got home from work and I'm not being a strong dad because I lose my cool. I get angry with my girls quick. And so this idea of being a strong dad, I think it plays right into that. It's not just going to happen on accident. We have to put the time and the effort and the homework. We have to do our homework to prepare ourselves to be the best dad, the best strong dad that we can be for our kids. So I think it'll be a good show. Before we get too much further into it, let's thank our sponsors. So yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for Kramer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. Really do appreciate them for supporting strong dads and everything that they do down there. So go check out Mark and let them know how much we really do appreciate them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's also thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for the support that they give strong dads. So for all your gardening, landscaping, and even gift needs, go visit Casey's Outdoor Solutions located outside of Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and just beautify your house and your yards. All right. So as we're sitting here talking, I am the word that came to my mind was the idea of a lot of us like to do things passively. Like we like to say that you're a dad or you're a husband or you're a fireman or you're a teacher, but just saying that does not make you one. So it's kind of this passive ownership of the title. But to really own something, you have to be active in it. You have to do it. Okay. So it's this passiveness that really gets us in trouble. Okay.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking a little bit there the other day just about the training. You guys as firemen, like what happens as a passive fireman? If you're that passive fireman, you're the fat fireman in the firehouse who just is looking for his night's sleep.
Yeah, so this is something we talk a lot about at work. This idea, a lot of guys you'll hear firemen say, like I'll just perform at a certain level the day of, when the bells go off and there's a working fire. I'll just, we'll talk about different scenarios. So you have a kid that's hanging out the window. What are you going to do? I'm like, I'll get them down, right? And those firemen are very frustrating because we talk all the time about this idea of being coachable and being ready to listen and absorb material and absorb information. And it's frustrating because this idea that it'll just happen by chance, it really puts us in a predicament because it almost gets into this situation of just being lukewarm, right? Lukewarm fireman is the worst. Like you never want to just be, I just show up for the schedule. I just show up because of the pay. I just show up because of the EDOs. All those things are great. But man, when it comes to the job that we do every day, we have to put the time, the effort, the training into. We talk all the time about if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, man, the same can be said about us as dads. Like if you don't put yourselves in, if you're not in a situation where you're using the things you've hopefully done homework on, you're not going to perform the way in which you want to. The same, obviously, for my job. So if I just leave it up to chance that the day of a fire, I'm going to be able to throw a 24-foot ladder to a second-story window, and I'm just by chance going to make that happen, I'm going to look like a goofball because especially when there's a high-stress environment, when the emotions are running very high and someone is hanging out that window, I have to make sure that I know how to get that 24-foot ladder to that second story window, which is why almost every single day we do what's called a daily throw. Almost every day I'm throwing a 24-foot ladder, 28-foot ladder, 16-foot ladder. We're throwing these ladders to make sure we are proficient, to make sure we are ready for when the bell does go off and the stress is very high. The emotions are running wild. We have built up the muscle memory. We talk all the time about muscle memory at work, making sure that we've done the practice to make sure that I remember when it's dark out, when I can't see, I can still go through the exact same motions that I've done 100 times before to make sure I can perform at the highest level. Because honestly, that's what the citizens of Dayton deserve from all the firemen. I mean, not just in Dayton, but all across the country. The citizens deserve firemen to perform at the highest level, and it's no different. Our kids deserve us as dads to perform at the highest level. And again, that comes with a little bit of caveat, right? Because we are human beings at the end of the day. We are gonna make mistakes, and we're not gonna perform to the way in which we want to. But man, why ever leave that up to chance that you'll just perform at a level you think you're going to? Why not give yourself the best opportunity, putting in the preparation, putting in the homework that obviously we're talking about today.
You're describing the difference really between a pro and a volunteer. I mean, if I'm a pro athlete, I'm expected to be able to do the very small incremental differences better, to avoid those failures and mistakes that, yes, any human can make, but the frequency of those mistakes has to become much less frequent when you're at the pro level, right? And so versus, if I'm a volunteer, hey, I dropped the ball now and then. What's the big deal? And hey, nobody's life's depending on you. You're a volunteer. But you're really separating that very well with the idea of, when you call yourself a pro, then you have to work at that level. You have to be on top of that game. So let's take that into being a dad, being a husband. I think of the things that I can do that are pretty volunteerish, like in that family realm, in the husband realm, the father realm, the idea that, hey, listen, I work for this family. I go out every day. I bring home a paycheck. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I provide a house for them. I make sure that there's food on the table. Yeah, great. That's great. But those are really, if you're going to call yourself a father, if you're going to be a husband, those are real base level. Those are entry level expectations.
Yep.
I mean, in fact, you don't even have to be present for a lot of those to even occur. You can just send your paycheck or a portion of your paycheck. We see that all the time through the court systems in a divorce, right? Like, well, I send child support or I send alimony. And so that takes care of the people that I'm supposed to be responsible for. So, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the pro level. What's the next level up?
Yeah. So absolutely. And this is where I think as strong dads, we need to actually take a progressive approach in this. We need to be, in this, we can't wait for different scenarios to come up, I can't just wait for a person to hang out the window. I need to train on that to prepare ourselves. So let's get a little bit about that, Merle. What are in your mind, obviously in the coaching that you and Linda do, when you have, we'll start off kind of with just the basics of marriage. When you have a marriage that's in crisis, what are some of the, and obviously, just like it is in the fire world, it's situational dependent, right? That there's a lot of variables that go into that. What are some basic things, some basic homework, activities that we can do to begin to prepare ourselves to build a stronger marriage?
Yeah, well, this is great. So, the very first thing that we have every couple work on is the idea that each and every day, a daily practice, just like you are throwing a ladder, as a fireman, every day you throw the ladder at least once so that you keep the muscle memory. Okay. In the relationship, in the marriage, every day you have to throw the ladder in terms of conversation. You have to get with your wife and you have to have some conversation, not just about what you're doing, but about how each other's doing. Okay. An example might be, hey, hon, how are you doing today? What's going on? Is there anything I can do for you? So you're touching base, because the idea here is I have to be able to know how she's doing if I'm going to be there to tend to her need. If I'm just seeing what she's doing, listen, on one given day, my wife can be doing thousands of things and I just lose track of them. That's not what she's concerned about. What she's concerned about is how she's doing. If she's doing 1,000 things and feels great and it's a great day and everything's going good, hey, great, right? But if she even has to do two things that day and she's miserable or she's got a stress and you don't receive that, you don't understand it, you just drop the ladder. Okay. Yeah. So
Yep.
the very first piece of homework is all you strong dads, every day you are checking in, you're throwing a ladder on some check-in on how your wife's doing.
Yep. And I want to piggyback off of that, Merle. One thing that I think honestly we probably heard it from you and Linda first. What was this idea that and I know all across all the dads listening, this happens all the time where you're having a conversation with your wife and you're trying to engage in what's going on, and then the kids start talking and the kids come up and start asking, hey mommy, hey daddy, I want to do this, or they start telling you about their day. And man, just piggyback off what you're talking about, Merle. Obviously, doing those daily check-ins, man. One of the most significant things that we do at the dinner table is we give each person a little bit of time to say, "How was your day?"
Yeah.
And obviously I have an 8 and a 7-year-old now. My oldest getting ready to turn 9. Like the interruptions happen, right? And when we talk about doing the homework and actually investing in that time to let each person speak, to let Jenny tell me how her day goes, when my girls try and interrupt, man, we have to learn to prioritize our marriage over parenting. And again, that's a very hard thing to learn that Jenny and I are still learning every single day. Not that parenting is obviously it is of the utmost importance, right? But our relationship with our wives has to be priority one. And one of the best ways we can do that is prioritizing that conversation. So just what you're talking about, doing those daily check, I think is a great place to start when it comes to homework we can do. But on top of that, man, prioritizing when someone is speaking, especially when your wife is speaking, not allowing your kids to interrupt that.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, I have another one, then another piece of homework, because if you're a strong dad, that probably means there's a good chance you still have children in the home, right? You have kids. And so one of the things that you can do that is a daily activity that you can do with your wife for the benefit of your kids is each day know where the two of you stand with your kids and what they are doing and how they are living their life. So let me give you an example. So here we are, we're down on a little vacation and the swimsuits are coming out. And so we have a 16-year-old daughter who's a very pretty 16-year-old girl. And she's pulling out some different pieces of clothing that I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. That's running a little tight, you might say. So rather than me going just impulsively like, what the heck, and start yelling and screaming, we were just around the house and she had on a piece of clothing that I was like, I don't know about that. I kept it to myself. And I went over to Linda and I said, okay, so just so we're on the same page, what's our deal going to be with clothing and the standard that our daughter's wearing now as she's getting older? And so Lynn and I had about a 10-minute conversation, everything from swimsuits to shorts to tops and then I said, okay, so now how are we going to handle us getting this information to her? Because this is definitely one of those things that we felt was better for Linda to have the conversation with her rather than me. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was just, so the idea here is daily, or at least weekly, keeping abreast on what your expectation is in the home for your kids. You do not make these assumptions. If you do, you'll become a volunteer sort of parent. The next thing you know, you'll drop the ball on this. And so my wife had a conversation with our daughter. It went very well, and we just said, hey, this is how we're gonna roll in our home when it comes to you walking out of the house. And it wasn't militant or anything like that. It was an opportunity for discussion.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, Merle, one thing when it comes to this idea of homework and preparation and preparing ourselves, if we're talking to strong dads, as you guys out there may know or may not know, obviously strong dads, we are faith-based, and man, I think when it comes to our homework, one of the most important things we can do to prepare ourselves to be the best dad possible for our kids, it has to start in our own walk with Christ. I don't think there ever should be an opportunity where you just leave that up to chance that your kids will just figure out who this God figure is. No different than we can't just leave it up to chance that we're going to be able to perform at the highest level when there's a structure fire. Man, we have to begin to prepare ourselves. We have to begin to put in the time in our personal relationship. And then on top of that, when it comes to your marriage has to be based off of biblical principles, because again, we can't just leave it up to chance. We can't allow Satan to come in and he's going to want to invade your home, and he's going to want to dangle different temptations in front of your kids that are not that are of this world, that are not biblically based. And some people, guys out there, may roll their eyes that I don't want to be really pushy when it comes to sharing who this God figure is. My kids, I want them to figure it out. And I think there's something to be said with that. But I also think we're talking about eternal salvation. We're talking about where your kids, if we truly sit back and say we want what is best for our kids, which I can't imagine there's a dad out there that would not say that. Like, we all want what is best for our kids. And man, there is no greater accomplishment. There's no greater task in this world that will ever be, that is more important than your relationship with Christ. And that can be said about the same of your kids. And this is something, Jenny takes the lead on. In the evening, she'll read to our girls. And then, we always pray together before lunch, before dinner time. And those are small things, right? But I think on top of that, the girls know where Jenny and I's marriage is founded. They know that our marriage is based on biblical principles. We're right now, as we've talked about before, we're Jenny and I are in the midst of doing the marriage program that you and Linda developed. And one of the things, talking about that, like, if you were to ask your kids right now, what your home, what is the constitution of your home? What is your home based off of? If your kids either A, don't know what it's about, or B, maybe that they're answering, things in this world that we care about our appearance. We care about what other people think about us. Man, I really would say that maybe that is not that you're not doing your homework, but maybe you're not putting in the time and effort that your homework deserves, i.e. your personal relationship, your actual walk. As we're preparing for the show, one of the verses that kind of popped in my head was 2 Timothy 3:16. And it says that all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. Man, when you talk about homework, like, this should be the scripture that we are using to know that the scripture is God-breathed, that God actually, he says that this is the useful words for teaching our kids, for rebuking our kids. Man, discipline is a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do when it comes to trying to fit that inside of this God, this umbrella of the God thing, like, because it's like, okay, do I spank my kids? Do I yell them? Do I ground them? Do I put them in the room? And man, I think if we use scripture, what scripture tells us when it comes to this idea of rebuking and correcting and training our kids, man, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. The idea here is your kids, it should not be a mystery as to what you and your wife's belief system is founded on. It shouldn't be a mystery that you are a Christian. Your kids, I should be able to ask your 8-year-old what mommy and daddy believe, and they should say, oh, they believe in Jesus and they have an understanding of that. And so it shouldn't be a mystery. But I think there's also, Kyle, some really cool points on this, that as far as our homework goes, we can talk about bringing Jesus in the conversation, and that our kids know about Jesus. But even more so, like, I want to be teaching my kids the functions of Jesus, the grace and the forgiveness, right? And the disciplines. And those are the things. And then giving credit to those, like, well, I give you a break because this is what Jesus does for us, or, hey, I'm disciplining you, or I'm calling you out because this is what Christ would do in this situation. The idea here that you and I are not the king and authority on where these principles came from. And so on a daily basis, that not only do our kids know that we practice these things, but we're also teaching, like you said, we're teaching the whole, I think, the foundational concepts. I think this is where, I really get frustrated with so many religious concepts, that it's all about doctrine, right? It's all about, what you claim to be versus the doing. what you
Sure.
actually do. Because one of the worst things that we can do is say that we're a fireman and then not even know how to turn the hose on, right?
Sure.
Like, oh, well, he's all mouth. And there's no different than saying you're a Christian, especially to your kids, and you're a total jerk. You're totally, just mouthy, abusive. Wait a minute. Not only did you hurt your kid in that moment, but you really did a long-term damage to their growth and their faith. Right? You were such a bad witness. So, the daily homework here is even more than your reading and all of that, which is extremely important. But how about showing your kids and then letting them know where you learned it?
Yeah, I like that. That's good stuff. So, I mean, Merle, we talked a little bit about this idea of things we can do with our wives as daily check-ins, which I'm sure in your world of the coaching with yours and Linda's ministry at Rock Solid Families, like what type of homework. So say we do have a troubled kid. We have a kid that's kind of a wild Mustang. I've heard you say that before, right? So we have dads out there that are dealing with kids, and sometimes it's like the dads may feel like, man, I've invested the time, I feel like I've done my homework, but the kid is still rebelling. Like what type of steps and homework can we start to do in those circumstances when we feel like we've invested the time, we've put in the homework, we feel like we've done all the right steps, but the results still aren't there? Because there are times I can remember feeling like, man, I put in hours and hours and hours studying for this test, but I still did. The grade didn't reflect the time and effort that I put into it. So what would you speak into a situation like that?
Well, it's a great point, because just because you train like crazy to be a great fireman doesn't mean you're going to be able to put every fire out, right? Doesn't mean you're going to save every house. We know that. I mean, the nature of the fire can outsmart you on its best day, right? And so the idea here is we are trying to minimize and reduce risk. And so that's why we're doing all of these practices. But then it does come down to the idea here that, sometimes bad things happen to good people, right? And so I have to figure this out. I have to first understand that these things can happen. And so when we're raising kids, when I see a kid who is kind of that wild Mustang, all right, the younger they are, the more hopeful I am. So, you might see a dangerous fire situation, but if you get there early, you're like, okay, we have a better chance now than if we got here 20 minutes later. Okay. So when I see things early, I can address them better. And one of the very first things we want to do is we need to stabilize and assess the situation. So when you have, as a dad, you need to be able to be practiced in that, to say, okay, wait a minute, we're not doing well here. Let's back off and stabilize the situation. What I mean by that is, let's take a quick assessment and see really what we are doing is working or not working. So when I have that tough kid like that, stop assuming that everything will just work its way out. Back off, get with your wife and say, okay, is what we're doing working, right? If it's not working, you have to be honest about that, because, banging the square peg into the round hole just because you think, eventually we can get this to work, really will just cause greater damage and lose time. So you back off and you reassess. All right. Once you reassess, that's where you've got to be honest. Like Kyle, as a fireman, that's when you guys are looking at the captain and say, Captain, you need to call another fire squad in here, right? I mean, this is now a 2-alarm or a 3-alarm. This is bigger. And so you have to be able to know where other help sources are. Do you need to get professional help for your parenting situation? Do you need a doctor's help? Do you need school help? Okay. You have to pull in those other help sources. All right. So again, early intervention is always best with these tough situations, but there's no one size fits all. I would never want to go on here to say that, like, just do this and it'll all work out. I'm not going to do that. And for your particular situation, when you feel like what you're doing is not working well, seek help. All right. And do it earlier rather than later. Many things do just outgrow themselves. They just sort of work their way out. But if it's the point where you feel like you're not getting any headway, then seek some help. All right. And again, that's what Rock Solid Families is about. That's what mental health is about. That's what your doctors, your pediatricians are there for. That's what your church is there for. Get help. That's why you need to learn to be connected.
Man, I love that, Merle. I just started thinking, at my firehouse, I think I shared on the show before, we have a rookie. He's the new guy. And, this is the first rookie that I have had that has no prior fire experience. So he's an infant, right? And it's really cool. I get to train him and I get to teach him exactly how I want him to be as a fireman, right? And he has no previous bad experience. He has no bad habits that he has had that he's built up to this point. And the fruits of the labor of daily training with him are starting to pay off, right? We see that practice, and he's only been in the streets for a couple months, 2 or 3 months. And it is so much more, it's a faster process, right? And so it makes me think, a previous rookie that I had some previous experience, and man, the things we wanted to teach him, it took 6, 8, 9 months to get him to where we want, because he had some baggage that he came along with. And I think the same can be said about our kids, man. If you have a kid, and I haven't quite had the experience, a wild Mustang, my little 8-year-old, she's a little crazy sometimes. But man, I think it's important to note that if you are in a situation where your kids are not, they're not acting, and they're not doing the things that you feel like you've invested, you've done your homework, and you actually put some time in, man, it's not going to be an immediate thing. Especially if this idea of a strong dad is later in the kid's life, where you're like, all right, I need to make a change, right? And the kid at that point is 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. It's going to take a while. We got to get rid of a lot of bad habits, right? I'm sure you can attest, and you can talk a lot about this idea of having kids who, they're older, they're almost darn near grown up at this point. And there's a lot of bad habits that we got to get rid of. We got to change. But man, just throwing our hands up and just saying, well, at the lost cause, we would never, ever advocate for that. And I think that's one thing about this idea of being a strong dad, man. One of the in my opinion, I think one thing God calls all men is he calls us into action. And it's going to take an action. It's going to take an actual, you making a conscious effort, you making a conscious decision that you're going to get involved. You're going to you are going to put it forth some action. You're going to do your homework to do whatever it takes. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, that was a great example about the rookie firemen. The idea here that if they come in with past experiences, they've just built on those. And so as a fireman, it doesn't matter. You still have to learn to work with this guy and train them up in a more suitable way for how you guys fight fire. So no different than with your kids. So teach them at a very early age what it is that you are expecting and why you do what you do. I think the why you do what you do in parenting goes a long, long way. As soon as those kids can start to question you, if you don't have a solid answer, it's going to come back to bite you. They're going to start testing out their own new ways. All right, let's wrap it up, man. Let's wrap it up. So, hey, this is good.
We have to give homework, right? We have to give homework for the homework show.
Right. So homework for the homework show. So your homework for this particular show is for you to sit back and think for just a little bit about where you have been dropping the ball and what area. Has it been with your wife? Has it been with your kids? Has it been with your own personal self in terms of taking care of yourself? Make an assessment of where you've been dropping the ball and getting sloppy. In other words, listen, I'll just figure it out when it's time. Okay. So assess that. And then just very simply, what level you're capable of. All right. Get back on the bike, start some practices. And when we say start practices, don't put it on the calendar for next Monday. All right. Put it on the calendar today. What are you going to do today? If it's with your wife, then today go home and ask her, how are you doing today? Start getting back in touch with her heart. If it's with your kids, reach in and show them some grace or some encouragement or something in that line. If it's with yourself, go for a walk today. You haven't exercised in 6 months. Today, start today. So anyway, I have a scripture I do want to read because I think it just reminds me of how we are to approach this with our kids. 1 Peter 3:15 says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect." I think one of the big things that we sometimes, because we always want to talk about a strong dad, and sometimes we think about a strong dad as the guy who can slam his fist down and, take control. But I think we really go so much farther in our homes by doing this with some gentleness, with respect, because we're bringing up very fragile little kiddos, right? And so when we do this, our wife can be very not fragile in a sense of falling apart, but we want to handle her heart the right way, and it doesn't take much to damage that. So we want to do these things in a gentleness and a respectful way. And when we do that, we become even more respected and honored in the father and dad position there. So anyway, that's your homework.
I love it. Yeah, good stuff, man. I hope you guys are having a good week. I hope this hits home a little bit. This is obviously, it's speaking to ourselves as much as we're out there, hopefully putting a message out there that means something to you guys. Share the heck out of this show. 5-star rating on all the platforms. Thanks so much for Kramer's Beer Out, Casey Outdoor Solutions for continuing the support that they give us, allows us to keep doing this, allows Merle to go to Florida, enjoy the nice, beautiful weather. So, so yeah, Merle, man, have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the Florida weather. Are you going to play any golf?
No, I didn't bring clubs, nothing.
Yeah. See,
that's one of those things I'm not ready to do the homework on. And you know what? I'm just a volunteer on the golf course right now.
You go to Florida and play golf. That's like, I think that's like as soon as you cross the state line, it's like you have to have.
Yeah. I brought 3 bikes down here. I've been riding my bike every day. I think it tells you where my priorities are. All right. Well, go out there, guys. Be a strong dad. Thank you for all you do for us. And we will talk with you all next week.
Hey, this is Kyle Crawford from Strong Dads. Strong Dads podcast would love to thank the Kramer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Kramer's Beer House was started in 1982 by the Kramer family, and since that time, they have definitely become a Cincinnati favorite. So if you're looking for an incredible meal in an incredible setting, definitely go down to Route 128 and check out the Kramer's Beer House.